I was supposed to be celebrating the biggest win of my life. Instead, I was staring at my daughter across a white tablecloth. Her lips were moving. The words felt like glass. My name is Margaret Cole. I'm 69 years old. 2 hours ago, I sold my company for $58 million. Lily didn't smile when I told her. She blinked twice. Then she leaned forward and said I needed to be careful with money at my age. The waiter arrived with our wine. His hands were shaking. He called me ma'am 3 times in one sentence. I waved him away before he could finish. When I turned back, Derek Kane was standing at our table. Derek, my daughter's husband. He wasn't supposed to be here. His face had that smooth look. Too smooth for someone who just rushed across town. He pulled out a chair without asking. Lily's glass was already in front of her. Mine sat untouched near the bread basket. My wrist moved before I thought about it. The glasses switched places. Derek didn't notice. He started talking about percentages. About safety. About how women my age don't understand modern finance. The restaurant was loud around us. Forks on plates. Laughter from the bar. A phone ringing somewhere in the kitchen. I watched Derek's mouth form the words trust and family and legacy. Lily nodded along. Her eyes looked tired. Or maybe just empty. 15 minutes passed. Maybe 20. Time felt elastic. Then Derek lifted his water glass. He drank half of it in one motion. His pupils went wide. Not surprised. Panicked. The glass hit the table hard. Water splashed onto the white cloth. Dark spots bloomed across the fabric. Derek's hand went to his throat. His chair scraped backward. Lily's face drained of color. She reached for him but her hand stopped midair. I sat completely still. The room shifted. Voices got louder. A woman screamed. Someone knocked over a chair. Derek slumped forward. His forehead nearly touched his plate. They tried to make me look old. Confused. Unfit. They thought I didn't notice the papers on their kitchen counter last month. The ones with my name in bold type. Conservatorship. Mental incompetence. Asset transfer. They didn't realize I had built a $58 million company by paying attention. This was no random meltdown. This was no accident. This was an inheritance ambush. And I was going to find out just how deep it went. 3 weeks earlier, the call came on a Tuesday morning. I was in my kitchen making oatmeal. The kind with steel-cut oats that takes 40 minutes. Daniel used to complain about the time. He'd been dead for 3 years now. The phone rang 4 times before I answered. A man's voice. Formal. He said his name was Howard Chen. He worked for Apex Capital Management. They wanted to buy my company. I stirred my oatmeal and didn't say anything. He kept talking. Numbers. Timeline. Due diligence. The words poured out like he was reading from a script. When he finished, I asked him one question. How did he get my number? There was a pause. Then he said my daughter had provided it. The oatmeal started to burn. I could smell it from 3 feet away. I hung up without saying goodbye. Lily called 20 minutes later. Her voice had that bright artificial quality. The one she used when she wanted something. She said Derek had a friend in private equity. She said they could help me retire comfortably. She said I deserved to relax. The word relax hung in the air like smoke. I told her I'd think about it. Then I called my lawyer. His name was Richard Moss. We'd worked together for 30 years. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. I told him about the call. About Lily. About the feeling in my gut that something was wrong. Richard was quiet for exactly 5 seconds. Then he said 3 words. Get everything documented. I spent the next 2 weeks creating copies. Bank statements. Company records. Property deeds. I stored them in 4 different locations. On day 16, I hired a private investigator. Her name was Sarah Chen. No relation to Howard. She had short gray hair and eyes that didn't miss anything. I gave her Derek's full name and social security number. Lily had left her tax returns on my dining table last Christmas. Sarah called me back in 72 hours. Derek Kane wasn't who he claimed to be. His resume had 3 fake degrees. His previous employer didn't exist. And he'd been married twice before Lily. Both wives were older. Both had money. Both were now broke. The pattern was clean. Textbook. I sat in my living room with Sarah's report in my lap. The pages felt heavy. Outside, children were playing in the street. Their voices carried through the window. High and careless. I thought about calling Lily right then. Warning her. Protecting her. But something stopped me. She had given Howard Chen my number. She had pushed the buyout conversation. She had sat across from me last Thanksgiving and asked about my will. The memory came back sharp and clear. Lily wasn't a victim. She was a partner. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The paramedics arrived in 4 minutes. They pushed through the crowd with their equipment. Metal cases, orange bags, a stretcher that squeaked when it rolled. Derek was still slumped in his chair. His breathing came in short gasps. One paramedic checked his pulse. The other asked questions nobody could answer. Lily stood frozen near the table. Her hands gripped the back of her chair. Her knuckles were white. I sat exactly where I'd been sitting. My water glass was still full. The lead paramedic turned to me. He asked if I'd seen what happened. I told him Derek drank some water and collapsed. My voice was steady, calm. He wrote something on a clipboard. Then they loaded Derek onto the stretcher. The wheels scraped against the restaurant floor. The sound cut through every conversation. Lily followed them out. She didn't look back at me. The manager appeared at my elbow. A thin man with sweat on his upper lip. He asked if I needed anything. I asked for the check. He said the meal was complimentary. His hands were shaking worse than the waiter's. I left $200 on the table anyway. Then I walked out into the night. The hospital was 8 blocks away. I didn't go. Instead, I drove home. My hands stayed steady on the wheel. The streets were empty for a Tuesday night. My house sat dark at the end of a cul-de-sac. Daniel had planted oak trees in the front yard 20 years ago. They were taller than the roof now. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air smelled like lemon polish and old books. The message light on my phone was blinking. 3 new calls. I didn't check them. In the kitchen, I made tea. Earl Grey. No sugar. The kettle whistled exactly 4 minutes after I turned on the burner. I sat at the table where Daniel and I used to eat breakfast. The chair across from me was empty. He'd always said I was too trusting. Too willing to see the best in people. He was wrong about that. I saw people clearly. I just chose to give them chances. But chances ran out eventually. The tea cooled in front of me. Steam rose from the cup in thin spirals. My phone buzzed. A text from Lily. She wanted to know where I was. Why I hadn't come to the hospital. Whether I realized how serious this was. I set the phone face down on the table. 2 weeks earlier. Before the restaurant. Before Derek collapsed. I'd visited Lily and Derek at their apartment. They lived in a new building downtown. Glass and steel. Expensive. Derek wasn't home when I arrived. Lily said he was working late. She made coffee in a machine that cost more than my first car. We sat on a white couch that looked like nobody ever used it. The cushions were too firm. Lily asked about the buyout offer. She said Apex Capital was reputable. She said their terms were generous. The coffee tasted bitter. I didn't finish it. I asked her why she cared so much about my business decisions. Her face changed. Just for a second. Something cold flickered behind her eyes. She said she worried about me. Said I was getting older. Said managing a company was stressful. The word stressful came out wrong. Too rehearsed. I told her I'd built the company from nothing. Told her I'd survived recessions and competitors and a husband's death. Told her I wasn't fragile. Lily smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. She said she knew I was strong. But even strong people needed help eventually. I left 20 minutes later. On my way out, I saw papers on their kitchen counter. Legal documents. My name was printed across the top in bold letters. I didn't stop to read them. But I took a photo with my phone. That night, I sent the image to Richard Moss. He called me at 6 in the morning. His voice was tight with anger. The documents were conservatorship papers. Filed but not yet submitted. They claimed I was mentally incompetent. They claimed I couldn't manage my own finances. They claimed I needed a guardian. The proposed guardian was Derek Kane. Richard asked if I wanted to fight it. His tone said he already knew my answer. I told him to prepare everything. Quietly. No filings yet. Just documentation. Then I called Sarah Chen again. The tea had gone cold. The kitchen clock showed 11:43. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Lily. This one was different. Shorter. The words felt sharp even through the screen. She said we needed to talk. She said things couldn't continue like this. She said I was making everything harder than it needed to be. The last line stood out. Dr. Price can straighten this out. I read it 3 times. Dr. Price. I'd never heard that name before. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dark kitchen. A search brought up his website immediately. Dr. Leonard Price, geriatric psychiatrist, specializing in cognitive decline and capacity evaluation. His photo showed a man in his 50s. Silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of smile that belonged in a toothpaste commercial. I clicked through his credentials. Harvard Medical School, published researcher. Expert witness in over 200 cases. All of them conservatorship hearings. The pattern was there, clear as daylight. Dr. Price evaluated elderly clients. He found them incompetent. Courts appointed guardians. Those guardians took control of everything. I scrolled through testimonials. Families thanking him for his compassionate care. For helping their loved ones. For making difficult decisions easier. None of the testimonials came from the patients themselves. My hands rested on the keyboard. The house was completely silent around me. Daniel's voice came back to me. Something he'd said 3 months before he died. He'd told me to watch out for Lily's boyfriends. Said they always wanted something. Said I needed to be careful. I'd laughed it off then. Told him he was being paranoid. But Daniel had been a lawyer for 40 years. He knew how to read people. He knew how to spot a con. The message light on my phone blinked red in the darkness. 4 missed calls now. I didn't need to check them. I knew what they'd say. Lily would want me at the hospital. She'd want me confused, worried, guilty. She'd want me vulnerable. But I wasn't going to give her that. I closed the laptop. The kitchen fell into darkness again. Tomorrow, I'd call Sarah Chen. I'd ask her to dig into Dr. Leonard Price. Tonight, I'd finish my tea. And I'd start planning exactly how to fight back. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Morning came with frost on the windows. I woke at 5:30. The same time I'd woken for 40 years. My body didn't need an alarm anymore. The bedroom was cold. I could see my breath in the gray light. Daniel's side of the bed was still made. It had been 3 years. I still only slept on my half. Downstairs, the coffee maker gurgled to life. Dark roast. The kind that smelled like burnt wood and tasted stronger. My phone sat on the counter where I'd left it. 7 missed calls now. 2 voicemails. I poured my coffee and listened to the first one. Lily's voice came through tight and strained. She said Derek was stable. Said the doctors were running tests. Said she needed me to come to the hospital immediately. The second voicemail was different. A man's voice. Smooth. Professional. He introduced himself as Dr. Leonard Price. He said Lily had expressed concerns about my well-being. He said he'd like to schedule an evaluation. He said it was routine. Nothing to worry about. His tone made it sound like a friendly suggestion. Like afternoon tea with a neighbor. But the words underneath were clear. Submit to the evaluation. Prove your competence. Or we'll do this the hard way. I deleted both messages. The coffee burned going down. I didn't mind. Sarah Chen arrived at 8:15. She drove a gray sedan that looked 10 years old. Everything about her was deliberate. Unremarkable. Easy to forget. That was why she was good at her job. We sat in my living room. She had a leather folder thick with documents. She laid them out on the coffee table one by one. Bank statements. Phone records. Property transfers. Derek Kane had a pattern. She'd traced it back 12 years. His first wife was named Patricia Brennan. Married at 62. Divorced at 65. She'd died 6 months after the divorce was finalized. Her estate had been worth $3 million. Derek walked away with half. The second wife was Helen Rodriguez. Married at 67. Divorced at 70. Still alive but living in a nursing home. Her money was gone. All of it. Derek had power of attorney when she was declared incompetent. Sarah's finger tapped the last document. Dr. Leonard Price had signed both competency evaluations. The air in the room felt heavier. I asked Sarah how long she'd been following this thread. She said 3 days. Said it wasn't hard once you knew what to look for. Said Dr. Price had testified in 43 conservatorship cases in the last 5 years. Said guardians in 39 of those cases had drained the estates within 2 years. Said nobody was investigating because the victims were all elderly. Isolated. Easy to dismiss. The morning light slanted through my windows. Dust particles floated in the beams. Sarah closed her folder. She asked what I wanted to do. I told her to keep digging. Find out who else was involved. Find out how deep the network went. She nodded once. Then she was gone. The house felt empty after she left. Too quiet. I stood at the window and watched a neighbor walk her dog. The same neighbor who'd lived across the street for 15 years. We used to talk over the fence. About weather. About grandchildren. About nothing important. She hadn't spoken to me in 6 months. Not since Lily started spreading stories. Stories about my forgetfulness. My confusion. My declining health. Stories designed to make me look fragile. The memory came back sharp. 10 days earlier. Before Derek collapsed. Before the restaurant. I'd gone to the bank to review my accounts. The manager was a woman named Susan Torres. We'd worked together for 20 years. She'd looked uncomfortable when I walked in. Avoided eye contact. I asked to see my account activity. She hesitated, said she'd need to verify some information first. The questions started simple. My address, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name. Then they got stranger. She asked me what year it was, who the president was, what I'd eaten for breakfast. The pattern was obvious. She was following a protocol. Testing my cognitive function. I answered every question correctly. My voice stayed level, calm. Susan printed out my statements. Her hands shook slightly when she handed them over. I asked who had requested the cognitive screening. She said it was bank policy for clients over 65. Said it was for my protection. The lie sat between us like a third person. I thanked her and left. On the way out, I stopped at the branch manager's office. His name was Robert Chen. No relation to Sarah or Howard. Just another Chen in a city full of them. I told him I'd be moving my accounts. All of them. By end of business Friday. He started to object. Started talking about relationships and history and loyalty. I cut him off. Told him someone had flagged my accounts without my permission. Told him I didn't do business with institutions that didn't trust their clients. His face went pale. He asked who had made the request. I told him to check his records. Then I walked out. By Monday, I had 3 new bank accounts. All at different institutions. All with managers who didn't know my daughter. The doorbell rang at noon. The sound cut through my thoughts like a knife. I looked through the peephole. Lily stood on my porch. Alone. She was wearing a gray coat. Her hair was pulled back tight. She looked tired. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. She asked why I hadn't come to the hospital. Her voice had an edge to it. I told her I'd been busy. The word hung in the air. Cold. Final. Lily's jaw tightened. She said Derek almost died. Said the doctors thought it might have been a stroke or heart attack. Said they needed to run more tests. I asked if they'd found anything in his blood work. Her eyes narrowed. The question landed exactly how I'd meant it to. She asked what I was implying. I told her I wasn't implying anything. Just asking questions. The wind picked up. Dead leaves skittered across the porch. Lily said Dr. Price wanted to see me. Said it was important. Said it would be better if I cooperated. The threat wasn't even hidden anymore. I told her I'd think about it. Then I closed the door. Through the window, I watched her walk back to her car. Her shoulders were rigid, angry. The engine started. The car pulled away. I went back to my coffee. It had gone cold again. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard Moss. He'd filed a preemptive motion, challenging any attempt at conservatorship, asserting my mental competence, demanding a jury trial if they proceeded. The legal walls were going up, brick by brick, but walls only worked if you had time to build them. And I wasn't sure how much time I had left. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The house creaked around me. Old wood settling, pipes expanding in the cold. I lay in bed and thought about Derek in the hospital, about the water glass, about the switch, about what I'd done. Daniel's voice came back to me. Something he'd said the week before his diagnosis. He'd told me that good people could do terrible things. If the situation was desperate enough. If the stakes were high enough. He'd told me that morality wasn't black and white. It was 1,000 shades of gray. I'd disagreed with him then. But now, lying in the dark, I understood what he meant. Sometimes survival required crossing lines you never thought you'd cross. Sometimes protecting yourself meant becoming someone you didn't recognize. The clock on the nightstand glowed red. 2:17 in the morning. Tomorrow, I'd call Dr. Price. I'd schedule the evaluation. I'd walk right into their trap. Because the only way to beat a game was to know all the rules. And I was done playing defense. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Dr. Price's office was on the 14th floor of a medical building downtown. The elevator smelled like antiseptic and carpet cleaner. Music played through hidden speakers. Something classical, unrecognizable. I'd called that morning. Made the appointment for 2 o'clock. The receptionist had sounded surprised I was willing to come in. The waiting room had beige walls and leather chairs. A fish tank burbled in the corner. Magazines were spread across a glass table. All of them were at least 2 years old. A woman sat across from me. Maybe 75. Her daughter held her hand. Whispered reassurances that sounded rehearsed. The old woman's eyes were vacant. She nodded at nothing. I looked away. The receptionist called my name at 2:15. Her smile was professional. Empty. She led me down a hallway lined with diplomas. Dr. Price had degrees from everywhere that mattered. His office had floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sprawled below. Tiny cars. Tiny people. Everything small and manageable from up here. Dr. Price stood when I entered. He was taller than his photo suggested. Silver hair perfectly styled. His handshake was firm, calculated. He gestured to a chair facing his desk. Leather. Expensive. Lower than his own seat. The power dynamic was built into the furniture. He asked how I was feeling. His voice had that smooth quality from the voicemail. I told him I felt fine. He smiled. Said that was good. Said Lily had expressed some concerns. Said he just wanted to have a conversation. The word conversation felt wrong in his mouth. He opened a folder on his desk. My name was printed on the tab. Inside were documents I'd never seen. Medical records. Bank statements. Notes from people I'd never met. He asked about my sleep patterns. My diet. Whether I'd experienced any memory problems. The questions came smooth and practiced. Like he'd asked them 1,000 times before. I answered each one. My voice stayed steady. My hands didn't shake. He wrote notes on a yellow pad. His pen scratched against the paper. Then he asked about Daniel. The question shifted something in the room. Made the air feel thinner. He wanted to know how I'd coped with the loss. Whether I'd sought counseling. Whether I still thought about him. I told him I thought about Daniel every day. Said grief didn't follow a schedule. Dr. Price nodded. Said grief could be complicated. Said sometimes it affected our judgment. Our ability to make sound decisions. The implication sat between us like a stone. He asked about my business. About the sale. About why I decided to sell now. I told him the offer was good. The timing was right. Simple as that. His pen stopped moving. He looked up at me. Something cold flickered behind his professional mask. He said Lily worried I might be making decisions under stress. Said stress could cloud our thinking. Said at my age it was important to have support. The phrase "at my age" landed like a slap. I asked him how old he thought I was. The question caught him off guard. Just for a second. He glanced at his folder. Said 69. Said he'd reviewed my file thoroughly. I told him 69 wasn't elderly. Told him I ran a company with 300 employees. Told him my last physical showed perfect health. His smile tightened. Said health wasn't just physical. Said cognitive function could decline without obvious symptoms. Said that was why evaluations like this were so important. The city stretched out behind him. Afternoon sun glinted off glass buildings. He asked if I'd be willing to take some cognitive tests. Said they were standard. Said they'd only take 30 minutes. I told him I'd think about it. His expression shifted. The professional warmth drained away. What remained was colder, more calculating. He said refusing the tests might raise concerns. Said courts valued cooperation. Said it would be in my best interest to demonstrate my competence. The threat was clear now. No more pretense. I stood up. Told him I'd already demonstrated my competence by building a $58 million company. Told him I didn't need his evaluation to prove anything. His jaw tightened. He said I was making a mistake. Said Lily had valid concerns. Said he'd have to include my refusal in his report. I told him to write whatever he wanted. Then I walked out. The elevator ride down felt longer than the ride up. My reflection stared back from the polished doors. I looked tired, older than I felt, but I didn't look incompetent. Outside, the afternoon air was cold. Traffic noise filled the street. Horns, engines, the mechanical pulse of the city. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah Chen. She'd found something. Needed to meet. Said it was urgent. I texted back an address. A coffee shop 3 blocks from my house. 4 o'clock. The walk to my car took 5 minutes. My hands were steady on the keys. But my mind was racing. Dr. Price would file his report. It would say I was uncooperative. Possibly delusional. Definitely in need of intervention. The conservatorship papers would be filed within days. Maybe hours. And once they were filed, everything became harder. The car engine turned over. Heat blasted from the vents. I sat there for a moment, letting the warmth seep back into my fingers. Daniel's voice came back to me. Something he'd said about legal battles. He'd told me the first move determined everything. Told me whoever filed first had the advantage. Told me defense was always harder than offense. I'd been playing defense since this started. Reacting to their moves. Blocking their attacks. But blocking wasn't winning. The coffee shop was called The Daily Grind. Red brick exterior. Mismatched furniture inside. It smelled like espresso and old books. Sarah was already there. She sat in the back corner. 2 laptops open on the table. I ordered tea. Earl Grey. The barista was young. Pierced nose. Tattoos running down both arms. She smiled when she handed me the cup. Said she liked my coat. The compliment felt strange. Foreign. Like speaking a language I'd forgotten. Sarah pushed one laptop toward me when I sat down. The screen showed a spreadsheet. Names. Dates. Dollar amounts. She'd traced Dr. Price's network. 47 cases in 5 years. 39 resulted in full conservatorships. The guardians appointed in those cases had one thing in common. They all used the same law firm. Morrison and Associates. Based in Chicago. Specialized in elder law and estate management. The firm's managing partner was named Thomas Morrison. He'd been practicing for 30 years. Sarah clicked to another screen. A photo appeared. Thomas Morrison at a charity gala. Tuxedo. Wine glass. Standing next to Dr. Leonard Price. They weren't just colleagues. They were friends. The pattern was clear. Dr. Price evaluated elderly clients, found them incompetent, recommended conservatorship. Morrison's firm filed the papers, got themselves appointed as guardians, drained the estates. Then they moved on to the next victim. The tea had gone cold in my hands. Steam no longer rose from the cup. I asked Sarah how much money they'd taken. She said at least 200 million. Probably more. Most of the victims were dead now. Their families had given up fighting. The ones still alive were in nursing homes. Medicated. Silent. Forgotten. The coffee shop noise faded into background static. All I could hear was my own breathing. Sarah asked what I wanted to do. Her voice was quiet, careful. I told her to find the other victims. The ones still alive. Get their stories. Document everything. She nodded, started typing notes. Then I told her to find a reporter. Someone who covered fraud. Someone who wouldn't be afraid of a powerful law firm. Her fingers paused over the keyboard. She asked if I was sure. I told her I'd never been more sure of anything in my life. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This wasn't just about my money or my daughter or my dignity. This was about 47 people who'd been robbed, silenced, erased, and somebody needed to fight back. The barista called out someone's order. A name I didn't recognize. The door chimed as customers came and went. Life continued around us. Normal, ordinary, oblivious. But nothing felt normal anymore. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Lily. She wanted to know how the appointment went. Wanted to know what Dr. Price had said. Wanted to know if I was finally ready to listen to reason. I didn't respond. Instead, I finished my tea. Closed Sarah's laptop. Stood up to leave. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. Tonight, I needed to prepare for war. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The reporter's name was Jessica Reeves. She worked for the Chicago Tribune. Investigative journalism. 20 years of experience exposing corruption. Sarah had sent me her contact information at 6 that evening. By 7, I'd read every article she'd written in the past 5 years. Medicare fraud, nursing home abuse, financial exploitation of seniors. She knew this territory. Her phone number sat on my screen. My thumb hovered over the call button. Outside, darkness had fallen. Streetlights flickered on one by one down the block. The house felt too quiet, too empty. I pressed call. She answered on the third ring. Her voice was sharp. Alert. She asked who was calling. I told her my name. Told her I had information about a conservatorship fraud ring. Told her it involved millions of dollars and dozens of victims. Silence stretched across the line. I could hear typing in the background. She asked if I was one of the victims. I told her not yet. But they were coming for me. More typing. Then she asked if I had proof. I told her I had bank records, court documents, a pattern spanning 12 years, names, dates, everything she'd need. The typing stopped. She asked when we could meet. I suggested tomorrow, 10 in the morning, the coffee shop near my house. She said she'd be there. Then the line went dead. My hand was shaking when I set the phone down. Just slightly, barely noticeable, but I noticed. The kettle whistled in the kitchen. I'd put water on without thinking. Muscle memory from 40 years of evening tea. The cup warmed my hands. Steam rose in delicate spirals. Daniel's chair sat empty across from me. The cushion still had the impression of his weight. I'd never sat there, never would. My phone buzzed. An email from Richard Moss. Subject line, urgent. Morrison and Associates had filed the conservatorship petition 2 hours ago. Emergency hearing scheduled for Friday morning. 3 days away. The email included scanned documents. I scrolled through them slowly. Each page worse than the last. They claimed I'd threatened Derek. Said I'd caused his medical emergency. Said I was paranoid. Delusional. A danger to myself and others. Dr. Price's evaluation was attached. 5 pages of clinical language. All of it saying I was incompetent. He'd never given me the cognitive tests. But his report claimed he had. Claimed I'd failed. Every word was a lie. But lies on official letterhead looked like truth. The tea had gone cold. Again. I seemed to keep forgetting to drink it. Or maybe I just liked having something to hold. Richard's email continued. He'd filed a response. Challenged every claim. Requested an independent evaluation. Demanded a full trial. But emergency hearings moved fast. Judges erred on the side of caution. Especially with elderly petitioners. The system was designed to protect vulnerable seniors. But the same protections could be weaponized. Could be used to strip away autonomy. Control. Everything that made a person free. A car drove past outside. Headlights swept across my living room wall. Then darkness returned. I opened my laptop. Started composing an email to my company's board of directors. They needed to know what was happening. Needed to be prepared. The sale was almost complete. Just waiting on final signatures. If the conservatorship went through, Derek would control everything. Could stop the sale. Could destroy what I'd built. The cursor blinked on the empty screen. White against black. What could I tell them? That my daughter was trying to rob me? That her husband was a professional con artist? That I'd switched our water glasses at dinner and he'd collapsed? The truth sounded insane, even to me, so I wrote something simple. Professional. Said there might be legal complications. Said they should proceed with the sale regardless. Said my lawyer would handle everything. Sent it before I could second-guess myself. The house settled into night sounds. Furnace clicking on. Refrigerator humming. The ice maker dropping cubes into its tray. Familiar sounds. Comforting once. Now they just marked time. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. It said I should drop this. Said I was making things harder than they needed to be. Said elderly people got confused sometimes. Said that was okay. Said there were people who could help. The message had no signature. But the tone was clear. Clinical. Condescending. Dr. Price or someone from his office. I blocked the number. Then I forwarded the message to Richard. To Sarah. To Jessica Reeves. Evidence. All of it was evidence. Sleep wouldn't come that night. Not really. I dozed in fits. Woke every hour to check the time. At 4 in the morning, I gave up. Made coffee. Strong enough to taste like punishment. The kitchen window showed my reflection. A woman I barely recognized. Older. Harder. Eyes that had seen too much. But still standing. Dawn broke gray and cold. Frost covered everything. The oak trees in my yard looked skeletal against the pale sky. By 8, I'd showered. Dressed in my courtroom clothes. Navy suit. White blouse. Pearl earrings Daniel had given me on our 20th anniversary. Armor disguised as respectability. Sarah called at 8:30. Said she'd found 3 of the other victims. 2 were willing to talk. 1 was too afraid. Said she'd keep trying. I told her to bring them to the coffee shop. Noon. After my meeting with Jessica. She asked if I was sure. Said it might be overwhelming. I told her I needed to hear their stories. Needed to understand what I was fighting. The coffee shop was busy when I arrived. Morning rush. Students on laptops. Businesspeople grabbing takeout. The normal chaos of a Thursday morning. Jessica Reeves sat at the same back table Sarah had used yesterday. She was younger than I'd expected. Maybe 40. Red hair pulled back. No makeup. Eyes that missed nothing. A recorder sat on the table between us. She asked if I minded. I told her to record everything. For the next 2 hours, I told her everything. Derek's pattern. Dr. Price's network. Morrison and Associates. The 47 victims. The $200 million. She took notes. Asked questions. Her pen moved constantly across the page. When I finished, she sat back. Stared at her notes. Her expression was unreadable. She said this was bigger than I realized. Said Morrison's firm had connections. Political donations. Judges on their payroll. Said going after them was dangerous. I asked if she was willing to do it anyway. She smiled. Small. Grim. Said she'd been waiting for a story like this. Said she'd need a few days to verify everything. Said she'd need to talk to other victims. Other sources. Said she'd need me to go on the record. Use my real name. Risk everything. I told her I was already risking everything. She nodded. Started packing up her recorder. Her notebooks. Said she'd be in touch. Then she paused. Looked at me directly. Said she admired my courage. Said most people in my position just gave up. The words hung in the air after she left. Most people just gave up. I thought about Patricia Brennan. Dead at 65. Half her estate gone. Thought about Helen Rodriguez. Living in a nursing home. All her money stolen. Thought about the other 45 victims. Their names on Sarah's spreadsheet. Their lives reduced to data points. They'd given up because they were alone. Isolated. Convinced they were crazy. But I wasn't alone. Not anymore. At noon, Sarah arrived with 2 women. Both elderly. Both afraid. We sat at the back table. Away from other customers. Away from curious ears. The first woman was named Ruth. 73. Her son had tried to conserve her. Dr. Price had done the evaluation. She'd fought back. Spent her life savings on lawyers. Won her case. But her son never spoke to her again. Her hands shook when she talked. The trauma lived in her body. The second woman was named Marion. 81. Didn't fight. Let them take control. Lost everything in 18 months. She lived in subsidized housing now. $200 a month in Social Security. That was all she had left. She said she wished she'd fought. Said she'd given up too easily. Said fear made people do things they regretted. Her words cut deeper than any knife. We talked for an hour. Shared stories. Shared pain. Shared something I hadn't felt in months. Solidarity. When they left, I sat alone at the table. My third cup of tea had gone cold. The pattern was becoming familiar. My phone buzzed. A text from Lily. She said the hearing was Friday. Said I should bring a lawyer. Said it would be better if I cooperated. Said she still loved me. Despite everything. The last line felt like a wound dressed in kindness. I didn't respond. Tomorrow was Friday. The hearing. The moment everything would change. But I'd done what I could. Built my case. Found my allies. Told my truth. Now I just had to hope it was enough. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Friday morning arrived with rain. It drummed against the windows. Steady. Relentless. The kind of rain that soaked through everything. I dressed in the same navy suit. The pearl earrings. My hands were steady on the clasp. Richard was picking me up at 8. The courthouse was 30 minutes away. The hearing started at 9:30. Coffee sat untouched on the kitchen counter. My stomach couldn't handle it. Too tight. Too knotted. The doorbell rang at 7:55. Richard stood on the porch. Dark suit. Leather briefcase. Rain dripping from his umbrella. He asked if I was ready. His voice was calm, professional, but his eyes showed concern. I told him I was as ready as I'd ever be. The drive was quiet. Windshield wipers beat a rhythm against the rain. Other cars moved slowly through the wet streets. Richard reviewed the strategy. He'd present my medical records, my business accomplishments, character witnesses, everything that proved my competence. He said the judge was fair. Said she didn't rush to judgment. Said we had a good chance. But his tone said otherwise. The courthouse was gray stone. Wide steps leading to heavy doors. People hurried past with umbrellas. Lawyers. Plaintiffs. The machinery of justice grinding forward. Security checked my purse. Waved me through the metal detector. The beep echoed in the marble lobby. The courtroom was on the 3rd floor. Room 304. Family Court Division. The hallway smelled like floor wax and old paper. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Everything felt institutional. Cold. Lily was already there, standing outside the courtroom with Derek. He looked pale, thinner than he'd been at the restaurant. But he was standing, walking, talking quietly with their lawyer. His recovery had been remarkably fast. Lily saw me first. Her face went blank, carefully neutral. She didn't approach, didn't speak, just watched me walk past. Derek's lawyer was a man named Peter Carmichael. Tall, expensive suit. The kind of lawyer who never lost. He worked for Morrison and Associates. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Wood paneling. Rows of benches. The judge's bench elevated above everything else. Judge Patricia Thornton. I'd looked her up last night. 62. Former prosecutor. Reputation for being thorough. She entered at 9:30 exactly. Everyone stood. The bailiff announced her. The ritual of authority played out. We sat. The hearing began. Carmichael spoke first. His voice was smooth, practiced. He painted a picture of a woman in decline. Said I'd become paranoid. Accused family members of theft. Exhibited erratic behavior. Made poor financial decisions. Said my daughter was deeply concerned. Said intervention was necessary before I hurt myself. Dr. Price was called as a witness. He took the stand, raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth. Then he lied for 20 minutes straight. Said I'd been combative during the evaluation. Said I'd refused testing. Said my behavior suggested cognitive impairment. Said I needed protection from myself. The judge took notes. Her face revealed nothing. Richard stood for cross-examination. He asked Dr. Price about his relationship with Morrison and Associates. Dr. Price said they'd worked together on previous cases. Said it was a professional relationship. Nothing unusual. Richard asked how many cases. Dr. Price hesitated. Said he couldn't recall exactly. Richard produced Sarah's spreadsheet. Highlighted. Annotated. 43 cases in 5 years. Asked if that refreshed Dr. Price's memory. The courtroom got quieter. The air felt heavier. Dr. Price said numbers without context meant nothing. Said every case was different. Said he always acted in his patient's best interests. Richard asked about Patricia Brennan. About Helen Rodriguez. about what happened to their money after conservatorship. Carmichael objected, said it was irrelevant, said we were here about me, not other cases. The judge sustained the objection, told Richard to move on. But the seed was planted, the pattern exposed, even if just for a moment. Richard called me to the stand next. The witness box felt like a cage, exposed, vulnerable, every eye in the room watching. He asked about my business, my accomplishments, my daily activities, everything that proved I was capable. I answered each question, my voice steady, clear, no hesitation. Then Carmichael stood for cross-examination. He asked about the restaurant, about what happened to Derek, about why I'd switched the glasses. The question landed like a punch. I said I hadn't switched any glasses. Said I didn't know what he was talking about. He smiled. Said witnesses saw me. Said the waiter had given a statement. Said I deliberately caused Derek's collapse. Said that proved I was dangerous. The lie was perfect, smooth, impossible to disprove without admitting what I'd done. I looked at Lily. She was staring at her hands. Wouldn't meet my eyes. She'd fed them that story. Twisted the truth into a weapon. Richard objected. Said there was no evidence. Said Carmichael was making allegations without proof. The judge asked if they had the waiter's statement. Carmichael said he'd submit it later. Said it was being notarized. Another lie, but effective. The hearing continued for 2 more hours. Character witnesses, medical experts, document after document. But the damage was done. The narrative established. Dangerous elderly woman. Declining mental state. Family forced to intervene. At noon, the judge called a recess. Said she'd review everything. Said she'd issue a ruling by end of day. We filed out into the hallway. Richard looked grim. Said it could go either way. Said the waiter's story was problematic. I asked what happened if we lost. He said Derek would be appointed temporary guardian. Would control my assets, my medical decisions, everything. Said the full hearing would come later. But temporary conservatorship could last months. By then, the damage would be permanent. Lily approached while Richard was talking. She asked if we could speak privately. Richard started to object. I told him it was fine. We walked to an empty conference room. Gray walls, metal table, 2 chairs. Lily closed the door, stood with her back against it. She said this didn't have to be difficult. Said if I just cooperated, signed the papers, let Derek help. Said we could all move forward. Be a family again. The word family tasted like ash in my mouth. I asked her when she'd stopped being my daughter. When money became more important than blood. Her face hardened. She said I didn't understand. Said Derek had debts. Said they needed this. Said I had more than I could ever use anyway. The honesty was almost refreshing. No more pretense. No more lies about concern. About love. Just naked greed. I told her she'd get nothing. Not a dollar. Not a piece of furniture. Not a memory. Told her I'd rather burn it all than let her touch it. Her eyes went cold. She said I'd regret this. Said the judge was going to rule in their favor. Said I'd lose everything anyway. Said at least if I cooperated, I'd have some dignity left. I walked out without answering. Left her standing in that gray room alone. Richard was waiting in the hallway. He asked what she'd said. I told him she'd made her choice. So had I. We waited 3 more hours. Sat on hard benches. Watched other cases get called. Other families destroying each other. At 3:45, the bailiff called us back. The judge had made her decision. The courtroom felt colder the second time. Or maybe that was just me. Judge Thornton looked at her notes. Then at me. Her expression was unreadable. She said she'd reviewed all evidence. All testimony. All documentation. Said this was a difficult case. Said the concerns raised were serious. Said elderly exploitation was a real problem. But said the evidence of incompetence was insufficient. Said Dr. Price's evaluation was questionable given his relationship with the petitioner's counsel. Said my business record spoke for itself. Said I demonstrated competence throughout the hearing. The petition for emergency conservatorship was denied. The words took a moment to register. Denied. Lily made a sound. Half gasp. Half sob. Carmichael was already standing. Already filing a notice of appeal. Already planning the next move. But for now. Today. I'd won. Richard squeezed my shoulder. Said something about good news. About next steps. I barely heard him. All I could feel was the weight lifting. The cage opening. The breath finally filling my lungs. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was still gray. But lighter somehow. Richard drove me home. Said we'd need to prepare for the appeal. Said this wasn't over. I told him I knew. Said I was ready. Because winning one battle didn't mean winning the war. But it meant I was still standing. Still fighting. Still free. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The article ran on Sunday morning. Front page. Chicago Tribune. Above the fold. Jessica Reeves had worked fast. The headline read, Elder Fraud Ring Exploits Conservatorship Laws. 200 million stolen. My coffee went cold while I read it. Every word. Every detail. Every victim named. She'd interviewed Ruth. Marion. 3 others Sarah had found. Their stories filled 2 full pages. Dr. Price's photo was there. Thomas Morrison's too. Their network exposed. Their pattern documented. The phone started ringing at 7:30. Reporters. News stations. People wanting comments. Wanting interviews. I let them all go to voicemail. By noon, the story had gone national. CNN picked it up. Fox News. MSNBC. Everyone wanted a piece. Sarah called at 1. Said the FBI had opened an investigation. Said Morrison's offices were being searched. Said Dr. Price's license was under review. Said things were moving faster than she'd expected. I asked about Derek and Lily. Whether they'd been contacted. Sarah said not yet. But soon. The article mentioned Derek by name. Called him part of the pattern. Said law enforcement would want to talk to him. The afternoon sun slanted through my windows. Dust motes drifted in the light. Everything looked normal. Peaceful. But nothing was normal anymore. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The message was short. Direct. It said I'd made a mistake. Said people like me didn't win. Said I should watch my back. No signature. But the threat was clear. I forwarded it to Richard. To Sarah. To the local police. More evidence. More documentation. The doorbell rang at 4. I checked the peephole. A man in a dark suit. FBI badge visible on his belt. Agent Marcus Webb. He showed his credentials through the glass. Asked if he could come in. The living room felt smaller with him in it. He sat on the edge of Daniel's chair. Notebook open. Pen ready. He asked about Derek. About the restaurant. About what I'd seen. I told him Derek had collapsed. Said the doctors thought it was medical. Said I didn't know more than that. The lie came easier this time. Smoother. More practiced. He asked about the conservatorship attempt. About Dr. Price. About Morrison and Associates. Those questions I answered honestly. Completely. Gave him everything Sarah had found. Everything Jessica had published. Everything I knew. He took notes for an hour. Then he stood. Said they'd be in touch. Said I should call if I remembered anything else. Said I should be careful. People like Morrison didn't go down quietly. The warning felt genuine, not threatening, just factual. After he left, the house felt too quiet again. The walls pressed in. The shadows grew longer. Evening came with more rain. Softer than Friday's storm. Gentler. It pattered against the windows like fingers tapping. I made dinner. Soup from a can. Toast. The kind of meal you eat when cooking feels impossible. The television news played in the background. Every channel covered the story. Talking heads debating elder abuse. Conservatorship reform. System failures. My face appeared on screen. A photo from my company website. Professional. Confident. Nothing like how I felt. They called me brave. A whistleblower. Someone who'd exposed corruption at great personal risk. The words felt hollow. I wasn't brave. I was cornered, fighting for survival. There was a difference. My phone buzzed again. This time a call. Richard's number. He said Carmichael had withdrawn the appeal. Said Morrison and Associates was distancing itself from the case. Said Derek and Lily were on their own now. Said the conservatorship was dead. Permanently. The relief should have been overwhelming. Total. But it felt muted. Distant. Because this wasn't really about the conservatorship anymore. It was about what came next. Monday morning brought federal agents to Derek and Lily's apartment. Sarah texted me the details. They'd executed a search warrant. Seized computers. Documents. Bank records. Derek was taken in for questioning. Lily too. Neither had been charged yet. But the investigation was moving. I sat at my kitchen table. Hands wrapped around another cup of coffee. This one actually warm. The oak trees outside were bare now. November had stripped them down to bone. Skeletal branches against gray sky. Winter was coming. I could feel it in the air. In my joints. In the way darkness fell earlier each day. The doorbell rang at 10. I wasn't expecting anyone. Wasn't prepared for visitors. Lily stood on my porch. No coat despite the cold. Her eyes were red. Swollen. She'd been crying. She asked if she could come in. Her voice was small. Broken. Nothing like the cold tone from the courthouse. I stepped aside. Let her enter. Didn't offer tea. Didn't offer comfort. We stood in the hallway. 2 feet apart. A distance that felt like miles. She said she was sorry. Said she'd made terrible choices. Said Derek had convinced her. Said she hadn't understood how bad it was. The words tumbled out. Fast. Desperate. Each one landing like a stone. I asked if she knew about his other wives. About Patricia. About Helen. About the pattern. Her face crumbled. She said she'd found out last night. Said the FBI had shown her evidence. Said she hadn't known. Said she thought he loved her. The pain in her voice was real. Raw. But it didn't change anything. I asked what she wanted from me. Why she was here. She said she needed help. Said Derek was going to prison. Said the lawyers wanted money she didn't have. Said I was still her mother. Said that had to mean something. The kitchen clock ticked in the silence. Steady. Mechanical. Counting seconds neither of us could get back. I told her I'd been her mother when she tried to take my freedom. When she conspired with Dr. Price. When she stood in that courtroom and lied. Told her she'd made her choice. Now she had to live with it. Her face went white. She asked if I was really going to abandon her. Let her face this alone. I told her I'd faced everything alone. The conservatorship, the threats, the fear. She'd chosen Derek over me. Now she could face the consequences. She stood there for another moment, tears streaming down her face, waiting for me to change my mind, to soften, to be the mother who always forgave. But that mother was gone, buried under betrayal, under survival, under the weight of what I'd had to become. Lily walked out without another word. The door closed softly behind her. No slam, no drama, just silence. I watched through the window as she got into her car. Sat there for 5 minutes, head on the steering wheel. Then she drove away. The house felt emptier after she left. Not peaceful, just hollow, like something had been carved out and removed. I thought about calling her back, about offering help, about being the bigger person. But some bridges couldn't be rebuilt. Some breaks were permanent. She'd tried to take everything from me. My money, my freedom, my dignity, my life. Forgiveness had limits, even for a daughter. That afternoon, I met with my company's board. The sale was finalized, signatures complete, $58 million transferred. They asked if I was okay, if I needed anything. Their concern felt genuine, professional, but genuine. I told them I was fine. Told them to take care of the company. Told them it had been an honor building it together. The meeting lasted 30 minutes. Handshakes, well wishes, congratulations. The ceremonial end of an era. Walking out of that building felt strange. 40 years of my life contained in those walls. Now someone else's responsibility. Freedom felt lighter than I'd expected. And heavier. The evening news showed Derek being led into federal court. Hands cuffed, head down, cameras flashing. Charges of elder fraud, conspiracy, wire fraud, identity theft. The list went on. 15 counts total. Lily wasn't charged. Not yet. But the investigation was ongoing. Her cooperation would determine her fate. I turned off the television. Couldn't watch anymore. Couldn't feel anything about it. Just numbness. Sarah called at 8. Asked how I was holding up. Her voice gentle, careful. I told her I was tired. Told her I'd be fine. Told her thank you for everything. She said I'd done something important. Said other victims were coming forward now. Said the system might actually change. Said I should be proud. But pride wasn't what I felt. Relief. Exhaustion. Grief for what I'd lost. For the daughter who'd chosen greed. For the family that no longer existed. But not pride. That night, I slept for 12 hours. Deep. Dreamless. The kind of sleep that comes after war. After survival. After everything's been spent. When I woke, Tuesday morning sun filled my bedroom. Bright. Clear. The storm had passed. My phone showed messages, calls, emails. The world continuing. Moving forward. Expecting me to move with it. But I wasn't ready yet. Wasn't ready to be the hero everyone wanted. The brave whistleblower. The symbol. I was just Margaret. 69 years old. Alone in a house too big. With a daughter I'd lost. And a future I hadn't planned. But I was free. And alive. And still standing. For now, that was enough. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. 3 months passed like water through fingers. Winter settled over the city. Snow covered the oak trees. Ice formed on the windows. The world turned white and quiet. Derek's trial was scheduled for March. The prosecutors had built a solid case. 23 victims willing to testify. Documents proving the pattern. Bank records showing the money trail. His lawyers were trying to negotiate a plea deal. 20 years reduced to 12. Maybe less with cooperation. Lily had been granted immunity. She'd testified before the grand jury. Told them everything she knew. Saved herself by betraying him. The irony wasn't lost on me. Dr. Price lost his medical license in January. Morrison and Associates was under federal investigation. 3 other lawyers had been indicted. The conservatorship system was being reformed. New oversight. Mandatory audits. Protections for vulnerable seniors. Jessica Reeves won a journalism award for her reporting. She called to thank me. Said none of it would have happened without me. Said I'd changed the system. But systems don't change people. They just shift the game board. Make the next predator work harder. The money from the company sale sat in my accounts. Untouched. I hadn't spent $1 of it. Didn't know what I wanted. Didn't know who I was without the company. Without the fight. Without a daughter. My neighbor started talking to me again. The one with the dog. She'd apologized in December. Said she'd heard rumors. Said she should have known better. Said she was sorry for believing them. I told her it was fine. That people believed what made sense. That I didn't blame her. But part of me did. Part of me remembered every person who'd looked away. Who'd believed I was failing. Who'd made it easier for Lily and Derek. Forgiveness came slowly, if it came at all. February brought a letter from Lily. Handwritten. 8 pages. Her handwriting shaky, uncertain. She said she'd moved out of the apartment. Was living with a friend. Working as a waitress while she figured things out. Said Derek had manipulated her. Isolated her. Made her believe I was the problem. Made her think she was helping. Said she understood if I never forgave her. But she wanted me to know she was sorry. Truly sorry. Said she'd do anything to fix this. To earn back my trust. To be my daughter again. The letter sat on my kitchen table for a week. I read it twice. Then put it in a drawer. Didn't know how to respond. Didn't know if I wanted to. Some wounds were too deep. Some betrayals too complete. Sarah stopped by in late February. Brought coffee. Good coffee. The expensive kind that tasted like chocolate and caramel. We sat in my living room. The same room where she'd first shown me Derek's pattern. Where everything had started. She said she'd closed her investigation. Said the FBI had everything they needed. Said her work was done. Asked what I planned to do next. The question hung in the air. Heavy. Loaded. What did I plan to do? I told her I didn't know. Told her I'd spent 40 years building a company. 3 years grieving a husband. 3 months surviving a war. Told her I'd never thought about what came after survival. She said most people didn't. Said survival was supposed to be the end. The victory. The happy ending. Said nobody talked about the emptiness that came after. Her words hit harder than I expected. The emptiness. That was exactly what this felt like. Not peace. Not relief. Just a hollow space where purpose used to be. She left an hour later. Gave me her card. Said to call if I ever needed anything. Said I'd been brave. Said she admired me. The words felt like weights. Heavy with expectation. With the assumption I'd keep being brave. Keep fighting. Keep being the hero. But I was tired of being brave. March came with early spring. The snow melted. Green shoots pushed through brown earth. The world waking up. I started walking every morning. Same route. Past the coffee shop. Past the bank. past the medical building where Dr. Price used to practice. His name had been removed from the directory. Office vacant. Another predator erased. Another empty space. The walks helped. Gave me something to do. Somewhere to go. A rhythm when everything else felt formless. One morning, I ran into Ruth. The woman from the coffee shop. The one who'd fought her son's conservatorship attempt. She was walking her dog. A small terrier. Gray around the muzzle. Old like us. She asked how I was doing. Said she'd followed the news. Said she was glad justice was being served. Asked if I felt better now that it was over. The question was simple, well-meaning, but impossible to answer honestly. I told her I felt different. Not better or worse. Just different, like I'd survived something that changed my shape. She nodded. Said she understood. Said winning didn't always feel like winning. Said sometimes it just felt like not losing. Her words settled something in me. A truth I'd been avoiding. This wasn't a victory. It was survival. There was a difference. We walked together for 20 minutes. Talked about nothing important. The weather. Her dog. The new coffee shop opening downtown. Normal conversation. The kind I hadn't had in months. It felt strange. Foreign. Like speaking a language I'd forgotten. But also good. Human. Real. When we parted ways, she said we should do this again. Said she'd be here tomorrow morning. Same time. I told her maybe. Didn't commit. Didn't want to make promises I might not keep. But the next morning, I was there. So was she. And the morning after that. Slowly, routines rebuilt themselves. Small pieces of normalcy. Coffee. Walks. Conversations about nothing. The house felt less empty. Or maybe I just got used to the emptiness. Derek's trial started on March 15th. I didn't attend. Couldn't bring myself to sit in that courtroom. To see Lily testify against him. Richard went. Sent me updates. Said the prosecution was thorough. Said Derek looked defeated. Said he'd probably take the plea deal. Said Lily had been strong on the stand. Credible. Composed. Said she'd asked about me. I didn't respond to that. Didn't know what to say. What to feel. Part of me wanted to call her. To bridge the gap. To try rebuilding what we'd lost. But another part remembered. The conservatorship papers. The lies. The courtroom. The choice she'd made. Some bridges stayed burned. Some distances stayed permanent. The trial ended in late March. Derek took the plea deal. 15 years. No parole eligibility for 10. By then, he'd be 73. If he survived prison that long. The news showed him being led away. Orange jumpsuit. Handcuffs. Head down. Cameras flashing. The same cameras that had made me a hero made him a villain. Two sides. Same coin. I felt nothing watching him. No satisfaction. No vindication. Just tired recognition. Another predator removed. Another story told. But stories didn't heal wounds. They just made them public. April brought my 70th birthday. I'd forgotten about it. Lost track of dates. Of time passing. Ruth remembered. Showed up at my door with cake. Store-bought. Chocolate. Too sweet. We ate it anyway. Drank tea. Talked about nothing and everything. She told me about her grandchildren. I told her about my company. Didn't mention Lily. Didn't mention Derek. Didn't mention the fight. Just talked like two women who'd survived long enough to see 70. Who'd earned the right to exist without constantly fighting. That night, I pulled out Lily's letter. Read it again. Really read it this time. Her words were genuine. Raw. Full of regret and shame and desperate hope. She'd made terrible choices, hurt me deeply, betrayed everything we'd been, but she was still my daughter. Still the girl I'd raised. Still the person I'd loved before everything broke. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, didn't mean trusting again, didn't mean going back to what we'd been. But maybe it meant leaving the door unlocked. Not open, just unlocked. Letting her decide if she had the courage to turn the handle. I sat at my desk. Pulled out paper. Picked up a pen. "Dear Lily," I wrote. Then stopped. Put the pen down. Wasn't ready yet. Maybe wouldn't be for a long time. But someday. Maybe. If she kept trying. If she proved she'd changed. If time did what time was supposed to do. Maybe. For now, that was enough. The possibility of maybe. The door unlocked. The future uncertain but no longer closed. I went to bed that night feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not happiness. Not peace. Just the quiet absence of war. And in that absence, the smallest seed of something else. Something that might someday grow into hope. The story wasn't over. Stories never really ended. They just paused, shifted, waited for the next chapter. But this chapter was done. Survival complete. Justice served. System changed. I was 70 years old. Alone in a house too big. With a daughter at a distance. With money I didn't need. With a future I hadn't planned. But I was free, and alive, and standing. And tomorrow, I'd walk again. Same route, same time, with Ruth and her old terrier. One foot in front of the other. The only way forward anyone ever really knew. The end was just another beginning. The victory just another starting line. And I was ready, finally, to see where it led.